Second time the charm for this one, I hope.
Yes.
Yeah, this is one that we've had to re-record because I went to edit it today, and there was this buzz and faint in the background. I mean, if you had a certain volume, you wouldn't hear it. But then what was really odd is every time it was quiet, it was dead silence. I mean, it was like nothing there, and our first syllable of a word would be missed. So
it's like the microphone was completely cut out.
Yeah, and we use two microphones, so that does make sense. But
that's odd. But anyway.
So yeah, and actually it was kind of serendipitous because I was able to throw some more information into this. So
our first recording of this episode, our first recording, wound up being a little bit short.
Yeah,
a little bit on the short side, under 30 minutes. So.
But I found a little more information, threw it in, and I think it's really going to help. So why don't we talk about Brigadier General Nicholas Herkimer?
Yes, let's do it.
Welcome to Unearthly Upstate. I'm Mari.
I'm Matthew.
And today, like I said in the pre-introduction there, we are going to talk about Brigadier General Nicholas Herkimer. You've been following the podcast beginning of Season 2. This is technically Part 3 of the Siege of Sandwicks. We're just talk about Herkimer. I mean, next year we could probably talk about Willett and Gainsford. Yes, there's a lot of players we could use. But we're going to concentrate on Herkimer. Mainly because his home is reputed to be haunted. And since this is Unearthly Upstate, we must talk about the ghosts and legends. And
absolutely.
His home is in Little Falls, New York. There is a red Georgian-style mansion that was built by General Herkimer in 1764. This is where the general died on August 16th, 1777. Or as you may find out, that date might be wrong.
Could be.
Yeah. 10 days after receiving his wound at the Battle of Oriskany, the house was reputed to be haunted, and it would be fitting that he would haunt his home. Tour guides report seeing candlesticks fly across the room. There have been reports of ghostly women, children, and voices that can be heard when no one else is around. A strange mist will rise in the cemetery. A lot of activities for a house associated with just one man. Yes, there is a family cemetery on the premises. I was going to save this to the end, but he was originally buried, much like Steuben, in an unmarked grave. Decades later, his family felt that was inappropriate and put a small stone on his grave, and now there's this giant obelisk there. But it is the family graves cemetery. So yes, when you say strange mist rising up the cemetery, there you go. Now, some would argue the hauntings cannot be from General Herkimer. He had built the home in 1764, and soon after the home was a refuge spot for people traveling. There were raids being carried out by the native tribes and other dangers that were posed to travelers. There were other deaths that occurred here and in the surrounding land, and these might be the cause of the most unusual hauntings. Now, why would someone build such a grand home and then use it to protect travelers? Because Herkimer was the sort of person that always wanted to see that the people around him were protected, because he felt it was his obligation. Even if his neighbors may have viewed him as a Dutchman that spoke a mixture of English and German. He was a third-generation German Palatine. The Palatine start in the New World was much like the Irish. It was filled with hardship and servitude. This started in the Middle Rhine area of Germany at the end of the 17th century. France would repeatedly invade this area, and multiple raids caused economic hardships and famine. Between May and November of 1709, over 13,000 Germans from this area migrated to England. So they had one heck of a refugee crisis on their hands.
Absolutely.
This caused a crisis in England. The Palatines were coming due to promises made about the land and the colonies. But England had not expected such a great response. Political conflicts began, delaying many of the immigrants to leave. One of the coldest winters in England also delayed the ships to the colonies. As Parliament discussed what to do with the mass amount of Germans, the hopeful settlers had to winter in a camp outside of London.
They had a little shanty town going out there.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't even house them in London.
No.
Which is, something they wouldn't dare do now.
Yeah.
Even at the expense of their own citizens.
Mm-hmm.
But finally, the Palatines were allowed to continue, and some ended up in Ireland, some ended up in Jamaica and Nassau, and the majority were sent to the colonies, to Carolinas, but most were sent to New York.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. But this was not the free land that they were promised. Instead, they were forced into servitude. They had to work for the crown. They were not allowed to settle their own lands and had to work where the crown told them to. And some landowners became rich due to the labor provided by the German Palatines. But on September 6, 1712, the crown ended the work requirement, and the Palatines were free to find the lands they were promised.
In one of our Patreon episodes, we go into detail about indentured servitude in the United States.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And this was a form of indentured servitude, but instead of owing money to a ship's captain, they owed the British Crown for the fare to come over. What is unusual with this one is the Crown did honor the contract.
They actually honored it, yeah.
You're going to find out when we release that episode about the indentured servitudes, servants, that the contracts are basically worthless.
Yeah.
And this, I think, is one of the few examples where you see a contract was honored.
Now, they settled in what would be known as the Mohawk Valley. And these were the first Europeans to buy land from the Haudenosaunee, or the Iroquois. 6 leaders of the Palatines met with the clan mothers. After getting over the shock of meeting with women, I suppose there was probably a bit of culture shock on both sides there.
Yeah, I think it was.
But they asked for permission to settle the land, and the clan mothers noted it was the suffering of the Palatines that they had experienced that moved them to make the decision to allow them to settle. But they had an ulterior motive, and that was due to the diseases with the wars with the French and native tribes. The population of the Haudenosaunee, or the Iroquois, had dwindled to 600 people, and the crown would give away their land with no compensation. And having the Palatines leasing the land would stop the British from taking the lands, and the British didn't like the idea.
Well, they liked the idea.
Oh, did they?
They liked the idea because now they had a way to block the French.
Oh, okay.
From raiding. So here's the Palatines. The French basically pushed them out of their lands in Germany. Mm-hmm. They spent time in a refugee camp while Parliament decided what to do with them. Mm-hmm. Finally sent them to where they wanted to go, mainly New York. Yep. And they are put in like that indentured servitude for a while, and then finally allowed to find their own place, so they get permission, and they're being used again. They're being used as a buffer from both sides, basically. Yeah.
Right. Johann Jost Herkimer, or Herkimer, settled on a piece of land near Little Falls. He became a trader, supplying goods to Fort Ontario. This started to build the family's wealth. The family's home was expanded and fortified during the French and Indian War. During the conflict, Nicholas Herkimer saw his first military action in 1757. He became a lieutenant in the Schenectady militia on January 5th, 1758.
One thing I read today, by adding information, that says Johann Jost was a bit of a land speculator. When he started making the money, he would buy up as much land as he could. So he became a landlord to a lot of people as well. Hmm. So it's kind of interesting how quickly they were able to turn their fortunes around, this family. But,
Well, he was given his own tract of land in 1760. And 4 years later, he built his home, knowing the history of the area, knowing that the Palatines were used as a buffer for the French. It is easy to see why his home was built to protect travelers and why so much death occurred around the home. And that would be the explanation for all the ghosts.
For all the ghosts, yeah, because, you hear about men and, the women and children. Well, that obviously wasn't him. He didn't have children. Like I said, there were raids going on. Obviously, there were other dangers to travelers, so this was a nice little respite. Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of those forts that were built up along the Mohawk rivers and were basically fortified way stations for travelers.
Yeah.
And then he just made his home into one of these fortified way stations. So that's very... You would think some people would build their grand mansion and then, if they were going to protect travelers, would protect them in a different building.
Different spot, yeah.
No, he had his home opened up to him, which I find very interesting. So, in the summer of 1775, Herkimer became the head of the Tryon County Committee of Safety. With the new responsibility came the new rank of colonel. And at this time, the settlers of the Mohawk Valley were becoming divided between the Loyalists and the Patriots, including one of his brothers. One of his brothers ended up going with the Loyalist. And when the Loyalist militiamen left the area, New York's Provincial Congress made Herkimer Brigadier General. To try to diffuse some of the building tension in the valley, in January 1776, Herkimer ordered the arrest of Sir John Johnson. And in June of 1777, Herkimer and 380 militiamen met with Mohawk leader Joseph Brant. He asked Brant to stay neutral, but Brant refused. He would stay loyal to the British king. Following that meeting, raids against the Mohawk Valley Patriots began. So instead, he tried to soften it. I mean, he tried to make it worse.
We mentioned, and the mention of Sir John Johnson. We've ran across that name before.
Well, yeah, he was at Oriskany.
Yep.
So these players were already... meeting each other and all that. And so I wonder how much of the battle in Oriskany was like going back and getting old blows against some of these guys, The following month, Thomas Spencer, a half-Oneida blacksmith, told Herkimer of a force under Barry St. Leger coming down from Oswego to lay siege to Fort Stanwix.
Well, then Fort Schuyler.
Yeah. And we've already covered this in the previous two, so we're not going to go into big detail. If you haven't heard them yet, just go ahead and download them and listen to them again. But the interesting thing was that brother I mentioned, he was at Oriskany as well. Oh. So that kind of puts an interesting theory. Who shot Herkimer off his horse? He could go conspiracy theory and think of his brother,
Oh, dear.
Yep. And that's what happened to Herkimer during the Battle of Oriskany, the 6-hour battle with the rain delay.
With a rain interval?
Yeah. So it was during the Battle of Oriskany when Herkimer smoked his pipe and directed his troops under the tree. Yeah, he got shot. And from the descriptions I found today, there really wasn't much left to amputate from the one description I read. The guy said it was shredded 6 inches below the knee.
Well, the typical musket ball at this time, typical mini ball, came in at, 60 plus caliber, but anyway, it was over 60 caliber projectile. When it strikes the bone like that, it just shatters it, and just turns that part of the leg into mush.
And that's what happened to him. Surprisingly, he didn't bleed out during the battle.
Yeah.
I mean, his surgeon did come and help him. The brigade surgeon William Petrie dressed his wounds. But the wound became quickly infected. William Petrie had also become injured in the battle as well. Another doctor named Younglove could have attended the general, but he had been taken prisoner by the Loyalists. And these are the reasons that may have contributed to the wait of 10 days before they decided to amputate.
Oh, my God.
So there were 2 doctors that could have treated him immediately. One was taken to the British camp, and the other had his own injury to deal with. Probably while he was dressing Herkimer's wounds, I'm thinking, Now, there are conflicting reports about how Herkimer died. Now, he was taken home, and a lot of the men who did survive went back to Little Falls. and as we described in the last episode, the dead were just left.
Mm-hmm.
So he was carried back. So if you were wounded and could make it back, you went with them.
I just checked. I did a fact check.
Okay.
On the caliber on a Brown Bess musket, which is what the loyal side would be using more than likely, and that is a 69 caliber.
Ooh, that's large.
So yeah, some came in at 58, and some were as large as a 12 gauge slug, 72 caliber. So the calibers weren't, not like in the American Civil War where it was typically a 52 caliber.
Mm-hmm. And those
muzzleloading rifle.
So those did a lot of damage. So the one that hit him was bigger than the
yes.
Civil War ones. Wow.
But fired out of a smooth bore projectile, which would be moving slower than a projectile during the Civil War. By the American Civil War, all of the weapons were rifled. Mm-hmm. But for these weapons, we're talking smoothbore muskets. So 69 caliber, smoothbore, British Brown Bess. That was the nickname for the British long or short land musket. Mm-hmm. And I can search for more facts here on those two.
Well, we're going to talk about what happened when they got Herkimer back home. So he gets taken home. They were defeated at Oriskany. At that point, everybody thought it was a defeat. As we know now, in hindsight, it actually set the British up for a bigger defeat later on. So we may have lost the battle, but now there are conflicting reports on what really happened in the last hours of Herkimer's life. One report from a letter written by Dr. Robert Johnson. He was the doctor who performed the amputation, the final amputation. He stated, "Yesterday morning I amputated General Herkimer," or he spells it here, Herkimer, leg. There not being left a proposal recovery without it. But alas, the patriot hero died in the evening. The cause of his death God only knows. About 3 hours before his departure, he complained of pain. I gave him 30 drops of laudanum and went to dress Mr. Petrie, as I left him in a good way as I could with Dr. Hastings to take care of them. But a 19th century historian, William Stone, quoted a statement by Colonel John Roof, a trader who was well acquainted with Herkimer and was present during the last hours of the general. Roof stated that Herkimer's leg was shattered 5 or 6 inches below the knee and was amputated by a young French surgeon in the army of General Arnold, Benedict Arnold. Contrary to the advice of the general's own medical advisor, Dr. Petrie. This is embarrassing because our son has a friend with that last name.
Petrie.
Petrie, and I mispronounced it. I am sorry. Contrary to the advice of the general's own medical advisor, Dr. Petrie. But the operation was unskillfully performed. It was found impossible to staunch the blood, and the blood continued to flow, and there was no physician in attendance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, first of all, who's this Dr. Hastings? It's only mentioned once. One account says there was no other doctor present. One account says there was a Dr. Hastings. One account mentions nothing about blood. Just he was high on laudanum. And another account states he was bleeding. There was nothing they could do. So you see, what actually killed him? Was it the wound? Was it the botched surgery? Was it the laudanum? Actually, I did do a little investigation on the laudanum, and the amount he was given would not have been enough to harm him, to kill him.
Ooh.
Although it would be easy to die from it, you just have to take a teaspoonful of this stuff, and you could easily kill yourself. Mm-hmm. The 20 drops would not even be, it would barely register. Okay. So it was very common to say 20 or 30 drops, depending on the person.
Okay. All right.
But if those of you who are not familiar, it's a tincture made from opium.
Yep.
So, yeah, anything to cut the pain, that would definitely cut the pain. Poppy juice, basically.
Basically.
Poppy tea.
Yeah.
Actually, poppy tea is something else.
Yeah, I've got another fun fact about the British long land musket, which was the typical weapon used by the British and Loyalist forces. Came in at a whopping 46 inches, 69 caliber. Yeah, that packed wallop.
Okay.
And so I could see why. And when you think about how close
the
battle was, getting shot with something like that, you could see how easily you can get a bow shattered. I'm surprised they didn't shoot his leg completely off, at that range.
True. And I am also very surprised they didn't try. I mean, yes, the one guy was injured on the field. I mean, pretty sure he was injured on the field. But I hate to say it, okay, we did discover Civil War medicine isn't as bad as we thought, but this is pre-Civil War. Why somebody else who, may have just enough skills to finish the job out in the field? But he was already suffering from an infection.
One of our kids, Alexander, who has a degree in veterinary medicine, if he were to be transported back to this time and place, he'd qualify as a doctor.
Yeah.
With the knowledge that he has. Perhaps a surgeon. So.
And he's a vet tech. He's not a veterinarian. He's a vet tech.
Vet tech. Right. And so, even with that amount of knowledge, he would be considered, well schooled in medicine.
They did also state that it was already infected by the time he left the battlefield.
Yeah. So we did address that wound. And yes, a musket ball is a very, musket balls, bayonets, swords, really filthy things to be injured with because the surface has got so much bacteria on it. And you couple that with the fouling of the black powder and everything that's in that black powder. Think of the things that go into making black powder: sulfur, saltpeter, a lot of nasty stuff. Charcoal.
Yeah, but the funny thing is, a lot of those are actually at one time. Some of them were used as antiseptics, so it's weird. I mean, you can use them separately in a weird. Because the reason I know that is because I worked on an episode that's coming up in which the explosive that was being manufactured at this particular place was used as an antiseptic up until the 1930s. And older hospitals will find supplies of this chemical and have to have bomb squads remove it. And these are stuff that's been around since the 30s. So you can just imagine, I know I've heard things like, I'm not sure much about the saltpeter, but the sulfur sometimes was used, So portions of black powder, the components of black powder were used.
Yeah, but that was before it would be ignited.
True.
Once it's ignited, it becomes filthy. Yeah. And a musket ball covered in fouling from the emission of black powder is a very filthy thing to get hit with.
But that's just really odd. This is the second time in this discussion about explosive components being used in medicine. Basically.
And you see in what really gets me, oh my goodness sakes, what really chaps my hide is when you see in these movies when somebody pours black powder into a wound and then ignites it to cauterize the wound. That is so stupid. That makes it even dirtier.
Yeah, because now you're forcing all that shit into the wound. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
there's no way.
And plus, you got to consider where he fell. It was that's not the cleanest place to fall. So anyway. What really killed him, we're not sure. Was it, did he die peacefully, happily high in laudanum? Did he? Well, the story goes he was reading his Bible until he died. So that's possible. He was relaxing. Yeah.
So not likely to come back as a wraith or something.
Right. But he was dealing with the loss of the leg. He was dealing with an infection. Yeah. The amputation was botched.
More than likely running a fever.
But the second thing that we have to question is the actual date he died.
Yeah,
Because
okay.
all right, now, traditionally, it is August 16th.
Mm-hmm.
That is the date.
August 16th.
August 16th. But I'm going to put a little wrench in the works here. So,
Right.
now Dr. Johnson's letter was dated August 16th, putting Herkimer's death 10 days after the battle. So that's what pretty much everybody, when you read the stuff, kind of agrees upon. But there was a letter written by Benedict Arnold to Gainsfort, dated August 21st, that stated the death had happened the day before, 5 days later than what Dr. Johnson reported.
Wow.
Okay. Again, a little bit of a wrench in there. So was it the 16th or was it the 20th?
Yeah, 16th. Oh, yeah, the 20th. Right, exactly.
Oh, not 5 days later, 4 days later than what he... So, could Arnold got the date wrong?
There's a discrepancy there.
Yes, there is. Well, we all know he died.
Yeah. Was it from hemorrhaging? You know,
Yeah.
Did he finally succumb to his wounds? At any rate, General Herkimer died childless, and his home passed on to one of his brothers named George Herkimer. And it was George's son, John, that sold the home. And in 1913, the home was bought by the state, and then the restoration began.
Yep. And I think that's where the stories of the hauntings began as well. Now, you said you probably didn't think Herkimer would come back and haunt. I think he would be a good candidate to come back and haunt his house.
You think so?
Yeah. Check it out. Make sure it's not being...
Oh, yes, because he always felt it his personal duty to look over the house and everybody and make sure that everyone stopping at the house was safe from being pillaged.
So I doubt he was the one who threw the candlestick. Let's just put it that way. I read somewhere that they did furnish the home. They reached out to relatives of him and saw if it had any family heirlooms at that time. So
right.
So the stuff that's in the home might not be his, but it did belong to the family.
Oh,
so
okay. So it did belong to the Herkimer family.
And there's relatives that still live today. Like as mentioned, our one son, his friend, his last name same as the doctor. I would not be surprised if they're related at all.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
You know, she comes from that area too, so we'll have to ask her, but I'm pretty sure she's probably related. Now it's just a strange coincidence. Okay, that wasn't...
I have to put that question to him.
Yeah, we'll find out. Or if you know who you are and you're listening, comment.
Yes.
Okay. Or our son who, our oldest, if you know who I'm talking about, comment on whichever podcast. So that was basically General Herkimer. And yeah, I kept saying he was a badass. He was a badass. But I mean, he's not a badass in like a Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger type way. He's more like an older Bruce Willis type character.
Yeah.
Or,
exactly. Yeah.
The sense of duty drove him forward, and he always, except for his mistake of rushing into Oriskany, but that was because his 2 seconds in command kept ribbing him. Mm-hmm. Especially with his brother being a loyalist, they're like, hey, well, maybe you're waiting because you're giving your brother a chance or something. They were really getting under his skin. So, that's why he went ahead with no scouts and made that big mistake there.
Oh, dear. Yeah. Yeah, set out without any forward observation.
So I'd say that was his biggest mistake. But he'd done it again, probably. From what I've read of him, he probably would have done it again. I think he might have, if he did again, chose 2 seconds and weren't so jerks, but,
Stuppers. Talking of trying it again, didn't Joseph Brandt and some other guy try the same kind of tactic and it failed miserably?
Yeah, like I said, it was out more in the western part of the state. And, of course, do I look it up after I mentioned it in the last podcast? No, I don't. But and when I say western part of the state, I guess it was more towards, I'm not talking Buffalo. I'm talking, it was more towards like Rochester in that area.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, they tried the same thing with the loyalists. Were like, oh, we know what you did in Oriskany. You ain't going to fall for it. And they actually routed Brandt and Johnson at that time. But that was like the following year. So it was, fool me once type situation. Like, we're not going to go in that ravine, you idiot.
Yeah, the Patriots, they did pause for a moment and think, This looks familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not going to get fooled with this again.
We may have to cover another famous amputation later on. I don't know when we can get to it, but we may have to cover Arnold's leg too, as well.
Oh, yeah.
This time we should go see it. We didn't actually go see the burial, but his leg is buried in Saratoga.
Saratoga, yes.
Mm-hmm. It was very cold and rainy, and we were getting tired and crabby, and we just didn't want to stop and look at a memorial till leg.
No kidding. Yeah, it was bad weather to go up there to Saratoga and have a look at everything. But at least we can say that we went out there and had a look. And
there is. Oriskany was small. Mm-hmm. Stanwix was small, but both of them led to Saratoga.
Both were pivotal in a list of the most important battles. Mm-hmm. Bloodiest battles, whatever. Oriskany was one of the more violent battles.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
In terms of blood. And it was pivotal along with the siege of Fort Schuyler, a.k.a. Stanwix. Mm-hmm. Both of those, both the siege and the Battle of Oriskany, Siege of the Fort and Battle of Oriskany, were pivotal in setting up events like Saratoga.
Right. Because if Ledgerhand screwed up the siege.
Yes, my favorite British commander.
He would have brought in the relief he would have brought in the support that they were expecting.
Oh, yeah.
Up in that area. So like we said in the last episode, although Oriskany is always kind of historically listed as a British win, it really wasn't.
No. In terms of numbers, sure. Mm-hmm. But strategically and tactically, no. It was a loss.
Yeah.
Because once Willett got out there with his column, found the encampment where the Loyalist native allies were encamped, they found all this stuff, all this material, and prisoners of war were there. Mm-hmm. Patriots who had been taken prisoner were there. And they told them all about it.
Yeah.
And so when the British basically, broke off their association as far as the Battle of Oriskany goes, and their native allies went back to their encampment. Right. They found everything gone.
Yeah,
and they're like, "Well, this is a load. Mm-hmm. What a crock. We're done."
Yeah, so they just came from this horrendous battle.
Yeah.
That ended up going hand in hand.
Back to less than nothing.
To nothing, yeah. So, yeah. So, like I said, it did.
And didn't they lose some key people?
They lost some chiefs, which helped escalate the civil war amongst the tribes then, too. Mm-hmm. Which I do, both the Loyalists and the Colonials took advantage of,
Absolutely.
The tensions were building pretty much. I mean, Herkimer himself tried to knock some of that tension down earlier. What was going on in his end?
Yeah.
And my geography of where the tribes were is kind of failing me right now.
Well, in terms of a British win, fine. Mm-hmm. But for their native allies, not so much. No. You can say it was a loss.
A loss on both sides for both the Loyalist native allies and the Colonials.
Yeah, exactly.
It was a loss from both of them. And like I said, that started up that really escalated their own civil war. Mm-hmm. And that's something that, I only discovered upon a few years ago, because that's something that's never discussed really much. Joseph Brandt's name I knew, but I never knew who he was. I never knew very interesting character. We've seen his little statue up in Mexico Point. His name comes up and again. His name comes up again and again and again, along with John Johnson. And, so these are becoming very familiar names for us. So, but I think that's a pretty good discussion of Herkimer. We are still running Patreon.
Yes, we are.
But right now, just get the word out. Anybody who really wants to support us, tell your friends, tell your neighbors.
And thank you again to our all of our listeners in the contiguous states and our international listeners as well.
Mainly Canada now, but hey. And any of you who've come over, I know I keep pushing this on the Monster Among Us Facebook group on Wednesday Wares, and I do warn you guys it's not too paranormal, but hey, any of you that are into history and you're listening, thank you, And Monsters Among Us is, if you're in the history side, you might not like the Monster Among Us, but if you really like the paranormal side, you would. But I'm just saying that because they've been very gracious to let me promote the podcast there. So
yeah, we still listen to Cryptonauts too.
Yeah,
put stuff out. And then,
So yeah, we got a Patreon. I've got a Tumblr page up now, which actually is a little easier to read than the web page. So you might want to go there for the sources for the show. Yeah. I've been posting a little extra stuff I find. Quite recently, there was an article about a German historian who came all the way to Little Falls, New York, to research Herkimer, because he came from the same town that Herkimer's family came from in Germany. So, there you go. He's still making waves up to this day. So it's kind of neat. So that was the end of our podcast.
I hope you enjoyed this, our ghastly podcast.
And we'll say goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Unearthly Upstate. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Patreon, and on our webpage. We are on iTunes, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, Podbean, and Google Podcasts. Please like, share, and review, and if you really like us, tell your friends. Unearthly Upstate is an Animated Liar Media production. The show is produced by Matt and Mari Minette, with purring provided by Honey and Lloyd. Research and writing done by Mari Minette. Music is by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. Unless stated otherwise in the episode, the places mentioned in the broadcast have not paid or contacted us for any type of promotion. And please check out our webpage for full credit and sources for the episodes.